Good afternoon and welcome to the latest episode of Shooting Straight. I am, as always, Voice of the Forge, shooting from the lip. You can find me on YouTube and on Twitter at Voice of the Forge and Voice of the Forge respectively. If you have any comments that you would like to leave or make, you can make them there. Any questions that you might have, I will be more than willing to take and potentially answer in later shows. If you wish to be involved in a live broadcast or anything like that, please let me know and I will see what I can do to make that happen. At the moment we are currently running with few facilities due to a move, but that hopefully shouldn't stop us being able to make the videos given the lack of budget that we've had. We have minimal equipment to move, so it should hopefully not have much effect. Now today I want to talk about migration, and there's been a lot of spin, there's been a lot of talk, and there's been a lot of conflation between ideas. Now, one of the things that I want to set out, must all, very, very quickly, is that I am not racist. I believe that people in need should be helped. I also believe that people should have a decent standard of living, and that as one of the first world countries we do have a duty of care to look out for people less well off than ourselves. But there is a massive but in all of this. Now, I'm also of the opinion that you have to help people help themselves. Without going too much into my history, I lived and worked in London for a number of years and had regular contact with the job that I did with City of Westminster, City of London homeless. And over the course of time, I started off being quite tender-hearted and being quite open to the fact that these were people with mental illnesses, the fact that they were hooked on drugs, or alcoholics, where they struggled to fit into normalised society because of either mental health issues or because of addictions, and I was more than willing to work with them to try and help move them through the system. And it became readily apparent after 2 years doing this that there was a hardcore of people who wished to opt out of society. They didn't want to live by anyone else's rules but their own, and part of that meant they lived on the street, and this is what they accepted as part and parcel of it. And these were people that got services like soup kitchens suspended because they would line up with everybody else, get the meal that was offered, eat it, and then go back and beat somebody else up and steal theirs. That's the kind of people that we were dealing with. And these were the hardcore element of homeless. These were people that had been given more than a few chances to get off the street, and they'd gone into the system, decided that they didn't want to follow the rules, or the rules didn't apply to them, or they decided that somebody had looked at them the wrong way and therefore decided to beat them to a pulp, and were therefore excluded through that. And they found themselves, through their own actions, back on the street. Those who did have mental illnesses were eventually helped off the street and into hospitals, or into a situation where they could have the care that they needed, and they were able to slowly rebuild their lives. Now, we're not talking a process that happens overnight, and yes, there were people that ended up with criminal records for being on the street because they had mental health problems or because of child abuse. But these were people that eventually were helped off the street, were helped into housing, and managed to put their lives back together. And there were others that through the whole time we were working with them were recidivists. They just didn't care. As far as they were concerned, they hated society, society hated them, two fingers up to everybody. They wanted to do what they did, and that's exactly how they lived their life. And of course these were people that found themselves in and out of prison and back on the streets because that's where they preferred to be. And I bring this up because I myself have been homeless. Um, I'm fairly well spoken. I've been fairly well educated. And in a couple of weeks I will be returning to college so that I can enrol at university as a mature student. So I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to be cold, wet, hungry, to hang out, to find a McDonald's which is 24-hour so that you can find somewhere safe and warm to sit for a little while. And I was also lucky enough that I had friends that every once in a while I could sleep on their sofas, use their showers, etc. So I wasn't as worse off as some people, but I was still homeless, and I was homeless for quite a long period of time. And this is important when you look at the stuff that I have now, and I look around, and a lot of it I was able to store at friends' houses and in people's garages and things like that. So once I got back onto my feet, I was able quite quickly to have some kind of normalcy in my new space, because I was able to access some of the things that I had before, and I was able to reconnect with those in a certain way that other people that have absolutely lost absolutely everything, and they haven't had that wherewithal to be able to keep some of the family mementos and to keep some of their favourite books and things like that. And then obviously other things that I've got, I've been very lucky through the work of charities for furniture and the like. But the point I want to make is I moved from a position of desperation into a position where I was helped by people, and it wasn't an ideal situation. There were problems, there were issues, and there were things that I had to compromise over in order to get my feet on the first rung of that ladder. And then because of my behaviour, and because I played the game, and because I did what it was expected of me, eventually I was able to move through the system and end up where I am now. And this is important to recognise. I have in front of me a map of migration that's been going on throughout Europe over the last God knows how many weeks. And before I start on the wider problem, I'm going to start with a very specific issue. And I'm going to start with this specific issue because to me it highlights the whole excuse me, to me it highlights the whole of the problem. Looking at Calais, many years ago we had the Sangatte camp, and we've now got the Jungle camp. And we have had, for many, many months, migrants trying to break through in the Calais port onto the Eurotunnel, onto lorries, and onto other transport to get into the UK. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, and the reason this is important, is because there is such a thing as the Dublin Agreement, or the Dublin Accords. And what they said was that for a refugee, they had to register in the first safe country they came to. And the idea was that you would have certain countries that would be access countries, they would be gateway countries, they would be the first country that you came to, and you registered there. But the point of the Dublin Accord was the fact that that country wouldn't take everybody, but they would be responsible for the processing. And what that would mean is that, say for instance you came from Tunis and you crossed over to somewhere like Palermo in Sicily, you could register in Sicily, and Italy, and what you'd be able to do is then go, right, I'm registering as an asylum seeker, I have family in Spain. So they would look at your claim and go, okay, well you've got family in Spain, go to Spain. You've got family in France, go to France. And what we've also got to remember is that if they've registered as an asylum seeker, as a refugee, in the first safe country they've come to, which is a member of the Schengen Acquis Agreement, which is what allows the free movement of people. And bearing in mind that we're not actually signatory in the UK to the Schengen, that's why we still have a border with France and Calais, so we aren't part of that agreement, that people can move freely through Europe once they've actually been given leave to stay. So it could well be that they arrive in Italy, be processed, and they could end up in Macedonia. They could end up in Romania or Hungary. The point is the fact that when you look at the map and you look at the way in which these people have travelled, they have not only been shut out of very wealthy Arab states with whom they share a religion and culture, they have shut their borders completely. And in fact, one of the biggest middle fingers to Europe was the United Arab Emirates turning around and offering Germany 200 mosques. Now that really, to me, took the bleeding Michael. That really was uncalled for. That really was a statement of intent. It's exactly how they view the EU and people with whom they share religion. They just don't care. That to me epitomises this whole thing. We're having to deal with a mess that other people don't want to deal with. And whilst there are arguments for the reasons why we are in the mess that we are, we wouldn't have had half this issue had it not been for the fact that when chemical weapons had been allegedly used and there was proof of it, we didn't have any backpedaling from Russia and France. But that's by the by, that's politics. What I'm talking about now, whilst it is political, is actually what the situation we've got on the ground, with these people moving through safe countries. Now, if we look, say they're coming from Tunisia and Libya, their first point of entrance is Sicily and Italy, right? They have quite a narrow crossing point at that place. But the thing is, we're getting people that are coming from Eritrea, Nigeria, Gambia, Sudan, and they're having to move through Libya in order to get to these camps, these UN camps, which are overflowing. And the UK has said that they will take refugees from the camps. And the idea, obviously, for that is to try and say, look, if you're in the place that you're supposed to be to get help, then we will help you directly and you won't have to take these risky journeys. And not only that, you won't be breaking the law. Now, Syria has to pass through... Now, Syria, if you're fleeing from Syria, your closest countries, apart from Iraq and the Lebanon, is Israel. You've also got Cyprus and Turkey. Now, the last time I checked, Turkey is a safe country. Just let's listen to this for a bit. You have to pass from one side of Turkey all the way through to the other side to get to the Isle of Lesbos, which is one of the Greek islands that they're travelling to, and to get onto other islands in the Greek area of the Mediterranean. Now let's just think about this for a moment. They have to cross friendly territory, and we're talking what, a good 800 miles, 600 to 800 miles, in a country where they don't necessarily want to settle, but is trying to get access into the EU and the Schengen Agreement. It's moving towards becoming part of Europe. And they're moving through this in order to get to Greece, in order to get to Macedonia, Serbia, Romania, Hungary. Now, we've got these people that are ending up in Sweden, they're ending up in Germany, they're ending up in France, Austria, Italy. I see no immigration coming into Spain. Now, Spain is one of those countries that's at the mouth of the Mediterranean, and again, it's only a short, narrow crossing from North Africa to get to Spain, which is an EU country, and we are looking at people here that are travelling through. Let's see now. Let's get some numbers on this, right? Greek islands, right, from Turkey. So they've had to travel from Syria, from the Lebanon, from Iraq, bypassing Cyprus entirely, which is split between Greek and Turkey. So they bypass a safe country there. They aren't looking at Israel at all, as far as we can see. Right, 2,000 a day. Right, and some 250 reaching Greece so far this year. Right, they travel through Macedonia. So they've travelled through one safe country, Turkey, which is outside of Europe. They could have travelled to Cyprus, which gives them access to Greece and/or Turkey, which is a country in Europe. They travel through Greece without registering. They travel through Serbia via Macedonia. Right? Serbia to Hungary, 170,000 this year. Hungary is now building a razor wire fence. That's not good news for the free movement of people in the Schengen Acquis. So far, the Dublin Agreement hasn't been invoked. So as soon as they set foot in Greece, they are supposed to register. So as soon as they set foot in Serbia, Hungary, Romania, Austria, which has had 10,000 this week alone, and guess what? Germany has said, oh yes, we'll take 800,000 people, and it's now closed its borders with Austria because it's taken something like 500,000. So that's 3 countries that they've passed through under the Dublin Agreement where they would have been registered. Sweden has taken 80,000, and per capita is more asylum seekers than any other European nation, and yet it's one of the furthest away. You've got to travel through the whole of Europe to get to Sweden, right the way through, without using the Dublin Accords. Denmark, 3,000 migrants in 48 hours last week. And as far as I'm aware, Germany has temporarily shut road and rail because of the influx. Now, again, Denmark is up in the same north part of Europe that Sweden is, having to have travelled through the whole of Germany, Austria, Italy, France. Right, like I said before, they've got something like 5,000 migrants in the jungle camp trying to get into the UK, and they've been trying for months. Where's the Dublin Accord there? We are talking about laws that we have on the statute books that were put in place to stop this kind of thing from happening. We now have camps with conditions that can be said to be nothing more than squalid. We have one of the biggest humanitarian crises going due to the vast numbers of people moving around. And yet, when we look at the map and we look at how this has been formed by people not paying attention to their own laws and their own remedies for this. And whilst it may sound harsh, there should have been boats in the Mediterranean far sooner. If we had boats in the Mediterranean far sooner, then we would have had people going, right, you've caught on the boat, you return to the nearest landmass that we can find. Oh look, you're now back in Libya. Oh look, you're now in Tunisia. Some lucky people might end up in Spain or Greece. But by far, the vast majority get turned back. And when you get that incentive removed, we wouldn't have had that little boy drowned. That sent a shockwave around the world and turned this into an emotive issue. The problem is, information is now coming out that his father was one of the people smugglers. Now, we don't know the truth of this, but we do know that a lie can cross halfway around the world before the truth has got his boots on. So there could be some truth to this. We already know that he drove the boat for part of the way because he claims that the captain of the boat threw himself overboard. Right, okay, well, what's the best way to hide a lie? With a modicum of truth. At some point, he was in control of the craft. Well, if he was in control of the craft for the whole time, as one of these smugglers that was taking his family across, bearing in mind that he was in a relatively safe country, he only wanted to improve his lot, which is the definition of an economic migrant. Remember what a refugee is. Oh yes, this is something I didn't do. I've talked about the flow of people, but I haven't talked about what they're doing. A refugee is someone that is fleeing war, fleeing economic or political persecution. So this is someone that either the government wants to imprison because they are a political enemy and would therefore fall under the Amnesty International remit where they try and get them freed. We're talking about someone that is not able to be safe under the country that they're fleeing from because of war, because of some kind of warfare going on in their country that they don't want to be party to. And I have to admit, I watched a programme the other night with Andrew O'Neill, and he conflated these two to such a point that it was a case of, right, is this a refugee, is this an economic migrant? Now, straight away, someone who's made it to Turkey because of war is a refugee. Someone who has been there for a number of weeks, who has been working and then decides that he's got better opportunities in Greece, becomes an economic migrant. They are no longer fleeing war. They are seeking better opportunity. People who hit Greece that want to get to Germany are no longer fleeing war. As soon as they get to Greece, they're a refugee. As soon as they say, I don't want to stay in Greece as a refugee, I want to be a refugee in Germany, why? Because I've got better chances there, they are then an economic migrant. This is something, it doesn't matter how poor they are, as soon as they hit a safe country where they can claim asylum, they are a refugee. Under the Dublin Accord, that is what they're supposed to do. As soon as they leave that country and go to a different country, which is also safe, they are then no longer covered by that, and they are an economic migrant. And it frustrates me no end when you see these people that are travelling through the country that have these charging stations for their technology. They have better gadgets than I do. Now, I'm able to record what I'm doing because I've been able to beg and borrow what I've got, and with a very limited budget put this together. But I don't have an iPhone. I don't have a smartphone. I can't afford them. And yet I'm looking at these people that are supposedly on their last legs because of war, disease, poverty, and I'm looking at them and thinking, well, they look tired, but they've got more technology than I've got, and a lot of them have got a lot more money than I've got. And the media narrative that we have isn't the truth. We have people saying, oh, the poor migrants, and they show us a shot of a migrant camp. They ignore the vast majority of the young, mostly male people that are crossing into the country that, when they're offered food, throw it back. When you've got people coming to help them, reject it and turn violent because they're not getting what they want when they want it. Is it any wonder, all of a sudden, that Germany has now decided to put the brakes on? Is it no wonder that they've now put a temporary stop to the Schengen Agreement, saying, no, our borders are closed? Temporarily, but they're closed. Is it any wonder that you've got the Hungarian Prime Minister, the Romanians, the Polish, turning around and saying, not our countries? Is it any wonder that we've got people that are starting to look at what's happening in Europe and going, no more? Now, there is another word for what is happening, and this is where I probably will overstep the mark for a lot of listeners, and I'm sorry, but if you really do feel that strongly, then this is my personal opinion. But there is another word for what is happening, and it isn't refugees fleeing war, it isn't economic migrants all trying to seek a better lifestyle. It is an invasion. It may be bloodless, but it is an influx of people into an area which do not share the same cultural norms, religion or history, who seek to live in a new society and by the very nature of their numbers change the nature of their society. and it has happened in the past. You only have to look at the UK's, well, it's not recent history, but look at the UK's history, and we've had lots of invasions, in inverted commas, that weren't necessarily wars or battles. And these are people that come and settle. These are people that change the nature of a country by the fact that they are in the country. And it's not always a bad thing. Let me just state this. There have been invasions of influxes of people to the UK which have benefited the UK, but nothing has happened on this scale, this quickly, this fast, with so many people that are alien to the European culture. And it could well be said by some people that we are witnessing the death of the EU culture purely because of the numbers. Let's just think about that for a moment. 800,000 people isn't a huge amount when you look at the amount of people that live in Germany. But bearing in mind that Germany has an aging population, it doesn't have the same number of young workers coming through to replenish the numbers. You have 800,000 people that are people that will reproduce more. So not only will the 800,000 grow through the fact that the families are bigger, so if we turn around and say, well, they have 3 kids, that's 50%. That 800,000 becomes 1.2 million. If the German peoples still have a declining birth rate, then their population numbers are going to go down. And within 2 or 3 generations, you could be looking at a country where a very sizable amount of the population is completely alien to the host culture. They all live in the same country. By now, they all pretty much speak the same language, apart from grandma and grandpa, which does happen in some enclaves. You've only got to look at the UK, and you do have 3rd generation families where the grandchildren are still translating for the grandparents. So this isn't me being completely hyperbolic. There is evidence for what I'm saying, and with them being such a huge block, because 50% is 3 kids. If they have 6, then that's 3 times the amount, which is 2.4 million in one generation. And if you have that repleted, before you know it, before long, you've got 10 million people from just one group. And that isn't considering any other immigration over the course of those years. And this is going to be replicated across the EU. So we have a massive issue on our hands to deal with. It isn't easy, but the 2 things that we should be taking away from this is the fact that economic migrants and refugees are not the same thing. Economic migrants and refugees are not an interchangeable term, but the way in which they behave can turn a genuine refugee into an economic migrant, purely by the fact of what they're doing. The fact that we have rules on the books which have not been followed by the countries because they haven't had the political will has had a huge effect on what's happening here. And it is because of the weak will of our leaders that we find ourselves in this position. We may have been able to stop this happening a long time ago, but the EU fell down. The EU failed. And now we are looking at the body of the EU on the ground, and it is being walked all over by these people. And my heart goes out to anyone who has genuinely lost everything they've got. I've been there. I know what it's like. to have nothing, to just want somewhere safe, food, shelter, warmth. But a lot of these people have that. They've fled the war, and now they're moving through Europe without following the rules set down by the EU. And that's as much the country's fault as it is the migrants in a lot of cases, because they're not enforcing the rules. But at the same time, by the time they get to France, you cannot argue that they are a refugee if they've travelled through Greece, Italy, Serbia, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Romania. Go through those countries and keep on going because you want to be somewhere specific. You are looking more and more like an economic migrant than you are a refugee, because you haven't stopped at the first country that you've come to that's safe. You haven't registered. You haven't gone, this is the rules, this is what I'm supposed to do. You've gone, I want to be in the UK because of X. So you've ignored all of the welfare, all of the options, and all of the duties that are on you as an individual to the state that you are going to end up in. Because let's not forget, with rights come responsibilities, and we quite happily forget this. So, by the time they get to Calais, we're looking at a different kettle of fish to someone who's fresh off the boat in Greece. And it's time, I think, we started to remember this, that there is a difference between an economic migrant and a refugee. It doesn't matter if there is an illegal entry or whatever the phrase they use is. If you don't enter through the normal means, you're an illegal immigrant. If you're a refugee, you are giving a status which forgives that. If you're an economic migrant, you don't have that forgiveness. I've rattled on now for far too long. Anyone who's made it to the end of this broadcast, I applaud you, I thank you, and welcome any comments and queries. Thanks.